If the world runs on action, why did Sheikh Abdul Qadir Jilani claim that intention is what truly moves reality? At first glance, the idea appears counterintuitive. In modern life, value is measured by visible productivity, what can be counted, displayed, or achieved. The faster we move, the more successful we appear. But Jilani challenges this assumption. He suggests that the visible is only the shadow of the invisible, that the true cause of every outcome begins not in the body, but in the mind and heart. For him, intention is not merely a wish or a thought before action. It is the architecture of reality, the unseen pattern that determines what an action becomes and how it unfolds. Without the alignment of motive and meaning, action is noise, movement without direction, energy without intelligence. Jilani's philosophy of pure intention is not a moral slogan, but a metaphysical and psychological law that bridges divine order with cognitive science. Modern psychology describes a pervasive condition of misalignment when people act outwardly successful but feel inwardly fragmented. This dissonance often stems from mixed motives, striving for validation, fear of failure, or comparison with others. When our actions conflict with our inner values, the mind experiences measurable tension. The prefrontal cortex becomes overloaded by internal contradictions, resulting in reduced focus, emotional fatigue, and a subtle sense of dishonesty with oneself. Neuroscientific studies show that intention activates the brain's attention and motivation networks, shaping what we perceive and pursue. When the motive is conflicted, half selfless, half self-serving, these neural pathways lose coherence, leading to scattered energy and diminished satisfaction. Behavioral science further shows that those driven by reward, approval, or status experience higher rates of burnout and lower creative flow than those guided by intrinsic purpose. 8 centuries before neuroscience, Jilani diagnosed the same condition in spiritual terms. Every action without sincerity is dead. When motive is impure, even successful action collapses inwardly because the energy behind it lacks unity. Born in 1077 in Baghdad, Abdul Qadir Jilani combined the rigor of Islamic jurisprudence with the insight of inner psychology. His teachings were not mystical abstraction, they were ethical precision. He described intention as the interface between human consciousness and divine will, the point where choice and destiny meet. Intention directs human potential, and its purity determines whether our energy harmonizes with divine order or resists it. He defined pure intention as a motive free from self. It arises from the synchronization of thought, feeling, and will toward one unified purpose. Neuroscience describes a similar phenomenon, coherent states where the heart, brain, and attention systems synchronize, producing mental clarity and emotional resilience. What Jilani called sincerity, modern science recognizes as cognitive and emotional integration. Jilani often quoted the saying of the Prophet Muhammad, "God looks not at your form, but at your intention." The moral and energetic quality of any act is determined before it takes form in the moment of intention. Intention is the seed pattern of destiny. Every thought and motive shapes how perception, decision, and attraction operate. When the motive is pure, causality unfolds harmoniously. When it is mixed, outcomes become distorted, not because fate is unfair, but because the inner blueprint was misaligned. In neuropsychology, intention directs attention. The brain filters trillions of inputs, prioritizing only what matches our internal goals. What we intend to see shapes what we notice and act upon. Even in quantum cognition, we find an echo of Jilani's insight. The inner stance of the observer influences what manifests as reality. Two people may perform the same act, for example, giving charity. One does so for praise, the other for compassion. The visible form is identical. The inner structure is not. The inner architecture determines the act's true effect in both worlds. Jilani taught that purity of intention amplifies spiritual efficacy, the unseen force that gives actions lasting impact. Impure motives scatter energy, divide focus, and weaken resilience. In psychological terms, this resembles flow states. When one's actions align with intrinsic values, attention becomes effortless. Productivity and creativity surge because there is no internal resistance. When we act from ego motives, such as wanting to appear superior or fearing judgment, we create unnecessary mental load. The brain must manage not only the task, but also the self-image surrounding it, reducing efficiency and satisfaction. MRI studies reveal synchronization between the brain's self-reflective and executive networks during intentional focus. This neural harmony mirrors Jilani's principle of inner unity, the state where the self no longer pulls in opposite directions. Two students study the same subject. One learns for knowledge itself, the other for recognition. The first experiences intellectual joy, the second anxiety. The difference is not in intelligence, but in intention, the internal voltage that powers thought. Jilani warned that a corrupted intention turns worship into pride. Even noble acts, when rooted in self-image, lose their essence. Modern psychology confirms this dynamic. When individuals perform good deeds for self-validation, they often permit unethical behavior later, as if moral credit cancels future responsibility. Ego-driven motives distort perception. The self-centered individual interprets others' success as competition, not cooperation. The heart narrows. Empathy declines. In Jilani's view, impure intention blocks divine assistance because the self becomes the hidden object of worship. In secular language, it short-circuits authentic motivation. The person feels anxious and spiritually fatigued because their motive is divided. The distinction between religious and worldly acts is meaningless without intention. A prayer for fame is worldly. A profession pursued for service is sacred. Why you act defines what the act truly is. Pure intention. For Jilani is not about self-discipline alone. It is about self-surrender. To act sincerely is to align one's limited will with the boundless intelligence of God. Every intention either reinforces ego or dissolves it. When action arises for personal gain, it tightens control. When it arises for truth, the self becomes transparent, a vessel through which divine order flows. In cognitive science, this resembles the activation of purpose-driven neural circuits. When one connects actions to a higher meaning, service, compassion, or faith, the brain recruits networks for long-term motivation and social bonding. This alignment also calms the amygdala and enhances regions linked to reasoning and empathy. Acting for God is neurologically synonymous with acting from expansion, not fear. Imagine a physician treating patients not as clients, but as divine trusts. The same medicine heals deeper because the intention behind the act alters its atmosphere internally, and relationally.Jilan, I said, the world is a mirror. Your state reflects itself back to you. Intention is the frequency to which reality responds. When the mind is sincere, perception clarifies. When it is polluted, perception fragments. What you expect, you perceive. What you perceive, you experience. Neuroscience echoes this. Through predictive processing theory, the brain continuously predicts reality, filtering sensory input to confirm expectations. Reality is co-constructed. To purify intention is to refine the model through which one perceives. Life, a rational psychology of perception where the outer world adjusts to inner. Coherence, the purification of intention, is a cognitive discipline. Begin with an intention check. What am I truly seeking? This reflection engages metacognition, interrupting habitual loops and recentering purpose. Emotional reactivity clouds motive. Practices such as mindfulness, prayer, or rhythmic breathing calm the limbic system, allowing decisions to arise from reflection rather than impulse. Define intrinsic values such as truth, service, knowledge, or compassion. Goals aligned with personal values produce greater persistence and well-being. Pure intention requires stable attention. Consistent focus strengthens prefrontal pathways associated with sincerity and goal maintenance. Meditation and contemplative prayer achieve this through sustained self-observation. Even in organizations, the principle holds. Purpose-driven companies outperform those focused solely on profit. When collective intention centers on contribution, coherence replaces competition. God aids those whose aim is beyond the self. Sheikh Abdul Qadir Jilani transformed intention from a moral reminder into a scientific law of being. Intention determines not only the ethics of an action, but its energetic and psychological outcome. Modern terminology mirrors his insight. Psychology calls it intrinsic motivation. Neuroscience calls it coherence. Behavioral science calls it value congruence. Jilani called it sincerity before the divine. Pure intention is not sentimental. It is structural, the hidden architecture of destiny. When the will, mind, and heart align in truthful purpose, energy flows without distortion. Purify your intention, and the world will purify itself around you. Change the state of the inner system, and the external system reorganizes accordingly. Reality bends not through control or force, but through alignment, through the quiet, deliberate power of a pure intention.